they got recognized, they saw the power of it, and then they realized, man, it's really a joy to give recognition. You know, you really get happy when you give a little bit of your heart to other people.
Welcome everyone to Crazy Good Turns. This is a podcast where we recognize and celebrate people who do crazy good things for others. I'm your host, Frank Blake, and I'm very excited about today's guest, David Novak. It's a privilege to have him on the show. David is someone who has done crazy good turns for me personally and for thousands and thousands of others. He has taught me and many others about leadership and about the importance of recognizing and celebrating those around you. He is the co-founder and former chairman and CEO of Yum Brands. He's got an enormous list of accomplishments, way too many to go through in this introduction. As an example, he was named CEO of the Year in 2012. He's written best-selling books. One of my favorites is Taking People With You. Recommend that you go out and read it. It's a great book. And he is now the founder and CEO of David Novak Leadership, a leadership development platform. David is a leader and teacher, and like all great leaders and teachers, incredibly generous with his wisdom. He's also the best thinker about the power of recognition, the power of expressing gratitude and celebration for people and what they're doing. I learned a lot from David while I was CEO at the Home Depot, and in many ways his thinking is foundational for this podcast. We are about recognizing and celebrating people. That is something I learned from David. So it's truly a privilege to have him on this podcast. And with that, welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Frank. It's just an honor to be on it. And, you know, I have to tell you, I don't know any leader that has done as much as you and is still humble and so kind. And, you know, I'm not surprised that as you continue to make a difference in the world that you created a podcast like this. So I'm thrilled to be on it.
Well, thank you. Recognition is such an underrated superpower in the world. And I'd like to start just, how did you get to that? How did you see that as a major theme of leadership, business, and just living a good life?
Well, I think, first of all, I just have to give my mom and dad a lot of credit because I grew up in a very humble background, but I had unbelievable parents. We grew up in a trailer, and, you know, they just recognized me throughout my life. You know, they still are the first one to call me if I ever do anything good. You know, they're just always recognizing. So I think I was born with a little bit of the genetics and that helped me. But from a business perspective, I got inspired about recognition. First, when I was at Pizza Hut, you know, I was running marketing and I gave away these little personal pan pizza pans every month. And then I had this big pizza pan that was the traveling pan that went from office to office. And I saw how everybody wanted to get recognized. The seminal moment in my life on recognition came when I was the chief operating officer for Pepsi. And I didn't know anything about operations, Frank. I was a marketing guy, and I got this job, and I wanted to demonstrate that I could be more than a marketing person. And I had a lot to prove. But I knew the only way I could do it is to go out and learn from the people who really knew what was going on. And for me, like you, I knew I had to go to the front line. I had to listen to people closest to the customer and see what they thought. So I'm at St. Louis doing a roundtable with 10 route salesmen at Pepsi. And I asked people about merchandising. And everybody starts raving about this guy named Bob. And they say, oh, Bob, he's the best merchandiser I've ever seen. He's tremendous. I learned more from him in 4 hours than I learned my first 3 years here. And he's getting all this praise. And I look down at the end of the table, Frank, and he's crying. And I said, Bob, why are you crying? He said, I've been in this company for 47 years. I'm retiring in 2 weeks, and I didn't know people felt this way about me. And that hit me in the gut. I mean, it was like, I go, my gosh, this guy has been in this company for 47 years. He's best in class. He didn't know that people felt this way about him. And, you know, I said, gosh, you know, in my career from that point on, I was going to make sure the number one behavior I would drive in whatever work environment or culture that I was going to try to create was going to be the power of recognition. Because I didn't want to have Bobs on my team. You know, I wanted Bobs, but I wanted to be recognized for what they do, not feel underappreciated. And, I also look at Bob and go, "Jai, this guy was so good at what he did, but you just think how much more he could have contributed if somebody would have plucked him up and given him even more to do." And by the way, what he was doing was the most important job in the company because it's closest to the customer, but he could have helped others maybe do it even better.
So what I love about it is, again, I learned this from you. We all as business leaders know you get what you measure. I think there's a corollary. You get what you celebrate. You want to know what a business is going to drive? Look at what it celebrates. And how did you bring that to life in Yum Brands?
So, obviously it's hard to impact everybody, but you try to do the best you can by casting the right shadow at the top and then spreading it throughout your organization and up the organization to the front line. To me, I always believed, like you get what you measure and you get what you celebrate. And in fact, my way of talking about that is that it's called purposeful recognition. I think every leader of every team or every company, there's 4 or 5 behaviors that that if these things happen where it really matters with your customers, you're going to be successful. So what I try to do is identify those behaviors that I knew would drive success, and then I would recognize the heck out of them. And guess what? People do what you recognize, so you see much more of it, okay? And so for us, when we first started Yum Brands, I wanted to start with the restaurant. We studied what were the behaviors of our highest performing restaurants. What did the managers do that really drove the results? And the restaurant manager, we called our number one leader because they built the team that satisfied the customers, okay? So we learned that, first of all, the restaurant manager believed in people. They had positive energy. They recognized people. People felt very appreciated. They didn't have any money to do it, but they'd take people to movies or they'd bring them over to their house for Thanksgiving or whatever. They also had accountability. They had a high appreciation for teamwork, positive energy. So basically what we did is we called them our how we work together principles. I never liked the idea of values. It sounds too amorphous. I like, what do you really want people to do? And so we called them our how we work together principles. Then we just started recognizing people in really fun ways. And I did it in a way that was right for my personality. When I was president of KFC, every time I saw one of those behaviors, I would recognize people with a rubber chicken and give them the rubber chicken, number it, write down what they did to get the recognition, which was one of those behaviors. And then I'd say, I'm taking a picture of you, and I'm going to put your picture in my office. And then I'm going to send you my picture with you, and you can toss that in the trash if you want, but I'm going to make my office celebrate what you do because people really make it happen. And so I started putting these on the wall. And then I became president of Pizza Hut, and I gave away these cheese heads, like the Green Bay Packer cheese heads, okay? And then I became CEO of Yum Brands, and I gave away these walk-the-talk teeth on behalf of our customers because we really wanted people to be customer maniacs, something I picked up from Home Depot, by the way. I had a lot of fun with recognition, but what I found, Frank, all around the world, people craved recognition, and all around the world, because I started recognizing people. People do what the leader expects, and then they started recognizing people, and recognition became the single biggest value of our culture. And I think it's the absolute reason why I've gotten much more credit than I really deserve, because it really was my secret weapon for success, and it was always the people who were making it happen that were getting it done, not me.
Well, it is such a powerful sort of foundational insight, I think. I also want to take a second and thank you on the air, because I remember hearing you talk about taking photos and putting the photos of your associates on the wall of your office. And so I blatantly stole that idea when I was at Home Depot. Whenever I'd walk a store, I'd take a picture with me and the associate, and I'd say, if you ever come to Atlanta, you can come to my office and look at your photo on the wall of my office. Some of the most meaningful moments of my time where people would literally bring their families in to look at their photo on the wall of my office. It's just so amazing, the power of recognition and just having somebody say, great job, and be specific and creative about it. And I think that's part of what you did that was so brilliant and continue to do, is that you're creative about it. You make it fun. You really connect.
Yeah, Frank, it's funny because people said, David, what happens if you run out of wall space, okay, with all the pictures? And I said, well, I'll put them up on the ceiling. And so then I put them up on the ceiling, and I would tell everybody, in terms of having fun, I said, I'm just going on the ceiling, and when I get up, every day I'm going to be looking up at you, And, but we had fun with it. But the most important thing is, if I would have been the only person doing that recognition in our company, it would have never been that big a deal. But people saw the power of recognition. They got recognized, they saw the power of it, and then they realized, man, it's really a joy to give recognition. You really get happy when you give a little bit of your heart to other people or some of your time to other people. That really drives, your own self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. And it's just a powerful thing. And what's unfortunate, Frank, and you know this, it's just not happening in our country. We have too much toxic leadership. It's shocking that people don't take the time to recognize. We've done all kinds of research in my company, which is now called David Novak Leadership. And, we've learned that leaders just aren't doing the recognition. The number one reason why people leave jobs is they don't feel appreciated and they don't get along with their boss. And the reason why they don't get along with their boss is they don't feel appreciated. And so this makes all kinds of business sense because turnover is a big problem in every company. So if you want to keep your people, you need to let them know that you're watching. I went out when we started Yum Brands and I visited all the best companies at the time. Companies like Home Depot, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Southwest Airlines. I went to all these great companies with great cultures and great consistent results. The number one thing that they all talked about that was the driver of their success was creating a work environment or a culture that everyone counts. It wasn't just the CEO. It was everyone counts, okay? And in fact, the people closest to the customer counted the most because you can't make your customers happy unless they're happy. And so this everyone counts notion can really be reinforced if you're a leader by focusing on recognition.
Tell a little bit about David Novak Leadership. What are you doing with that?
When I retired, I read Ken Blanchard's book called You Don't Retire, You Refire, And so I refired, and I wanted to focus my time on doing what I love most, which is leadership development. When I was at Yum Brands, I taught a leadership program called Taking People With You and actually wrote a book on it. I taught it to over 4,000 people in our company, and I wrote the book so we could scale it with all our restaurant managers in 8 different languages.
It's a great book, by the way.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have a link to that in our podcast.
I loved writing the book, but I loved teaching the program. And the way I did it, Frank, is I had everybody in the company that came to the program, they had to come in with the single biggest thing that they were working on that could grow our business. And then we worked on a plan in the next 3 days, and I taught every bit of this for 3 days, okay? They walked out with a plan on how they could make it happen, how they could take people with it to get it done, because nobody can get stuff done by themselves. But anyway, this was my most favorite thing that I did. It was my most efficient thing because I knew what was going on in the company, and I helped people get what needed to get done. So anyway, I said, okay, how do I make a big difference going forward? I said, well, I love leadership, so I'm going to focus on leadership and recognition. And I actually started out with a company called OGO, and it was a recognition company. And then I decided, no, I'm going to put this under a bigger umbrella of David Novak Leadership, which I did. I do digital leadership training with my company, and I also do these podcasts. I have my own podcast. It's basically how leaders lead. I give people access to leaders like you that they'd never get otherwise, and it's all free. There's no way you can listen to these podcasts without learning. And you know what else I love about it? I learned so much. I learned stuff about people that I've known for 20 years when I do these podcasts, and I just think it's great. So it's a huge win-win. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. We offer 2 programs. We offer one program, digital program called Purposeful Recognition, which is everything I know about how to recognize and make it happen in your company and your team. Then I have another program called Essential Leadership Traits, which is a sort of an MBA in developing your own personal leadership characteristics.
And that anybody can sign up for that?
The digital programs, actually, we charge for. I'm not trying to make any money, but I have a team that I'd like to see do well, okay? And but the podcasts are free.
Also, it's a level of commitment that you get.
So far, all I'm doing is losing money, okay? It doesn't matter to me because there's nothing that I do that it gives me more joy than trying to help other leaders be the best they can be.
As you've thought about it and talked to people, why do you think that this recognition element isn't as common as it should be?
A lot of leaders feel that if you recognize somebody, they'll stop working. They'll coast, which is exactly the opposite of what happens. A lot of people say if they recognize this person, everybody else will want to be recognized. They come up with all these reasons why it's going to, hinder performance, okay? When in fact it accelerates performance. I hated that excuse that, if I recognize so-and-so, so-and-so will want to be recognized. Oh, well, you want them to want to be recognized. If you're only going to recognize one person in your life, I guess it's probably a bad thing to do, okay? But I always said, hey, look, recognize everybody that's driving those behaviors that that get success, and do it spontaneously when you see it. When you see them happen, and stop everybody right then and there and say, boy, Sally, that was a fantastic presentation. We're going to be able to take technology to the next level. That was amazing. Or say, gee, Joe, you've been a cook for Kentucky Fried Chicken for 25 years. The quality is so good. Quality is what it's all about. Thanks for all you do. Okay. And you know what? It really, really works. But people are afraid that people will take their pedal off the metal if they recognize.
Have you seen any changes in approaches to leadership or the questions that people are asking you during the virus, during this pandemic?
What do you do in a crisis? I mean, I get that question. I'm sure you get that. I think what people are really learning, and the really best CEOs are doing, the best leaders are doing, they are communicating. They're over-communicating. I just had a conversation yesterday with Brian Cornell from Target, okay? He said, you won't believe everything that we're doing virtually. He says, I actually have almost more personal contact with everybody by doing the virtual work that we're doing right now than I had when I was doing it out there in the field in person. He says, because I'm having these chats and everybody can link into them. And people are starting to ask me questions they would have never asked me because they're getting to know me better. He said, I think it's going to change the way our business is done forever. I'm sure it will, but I do think communication in any crisis is key. People need to know this is how you see the problem. This is what we're going to do about it. This is what we're going to do to make sure that, everybody's safe. Here's how we're going to come out of this even better. Leaders have got to create hope. You just can't say, oh my God, we're never going to get back. You got to paint a good future.
So you also have a foundation, Lift the Life Foundation. What are you doing with your foundation?
Our foundation is called Lift the Life because what we want to do is help people achieve their potential they otherwise couldn't achieve without our help. We're doing that by focusing on leadership development, type 1 diabetes. My wife was a type 1 diabetes. She's had diabetes since she was 7 years old. Early childhood education, hunger, and veteran support. We're big supporters of the Folds of Honor and helping kids get scholarships. And the thing that I'm spending the most time on this is the leadership. We have, in addition to the David Novak Leadership, which is for-profit, we've also created this program that I'm really proud of called Lead for Change. It's the largest privately funded leadership programs in middle schools and high schools in our country. We've got 10,000 teachers. We've reached over 1.5 million people. We took my Taking People With You curriculum, and I created training videos for teachers. And the kids get together and work on a project that'll make a difference in their community, and the teachers teach them the Taking People With You principles. This is really exciting. It is so much fun to see this thing grow off because people basically, you don't learn how to lead. We also created the Novak Leadership Institute at the University of Missouri, where we're taking the Taking People With You and trying to teach people, students, college students. And then Ashley, my daughter, found this person named Jan Helson who started this program called Global Game Changers, where she's teaching leadership in elementary schools, where she teaches people to understand what's your unique gift, okay? Put your heart into your unique gift, and that becomes your superpower, and you can change the world with it, okay? And it's a great program. So what we're going to do is take our Lead for Change learnings that we have and help fund her to take Global Game Changers national. We're trying as a family to develop leaders in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and colleges, and then help aspiring leaders when they get out of college through David Novak Leadership.
That is so brilliant. It makes me wonder, particularly because I think of you as this high energy, optimistic person. In addition to your parents, was there some person, some moment that you said, boy, it's either a recognition moment or a learning about leadership that you think was a bit of a fulcrum?
Well, Frank, people make all the difference to you in their world. I started out by talking about my parents. I never worked for somebody who didn't ultimately become a CEO of a company. Okay, so everybody I worked for coming up in my career was extremely talented and very invested in me. And so that's something that you can't just make happen. That's God's grace on me, And, I don't take that for granted. But I had so many people look at me and give me opportunities. And, I obviously worked my tail off. I mean, I wasn't that smart, but nobody was going to outwork me. But I had people really invest in me up and down the line. I think probably my greatest mentor was a guy by the name of Andy Pearson, who I founded Yum Brands with, and he was 72 years old. And when he passed away at 80, I spoke at his funeral. He was my very best friend. But this guy was a big-time learner. I mean, he taught at Harvard Business School, was president of PepsiCo. He introduced me to everybody and anybody. I met all these phenomenal people because of Andy, but Andy opened up all these doors for me, and he just believed in me so much. And what was really interesting, Frank, he was known for being famous for being the toughest guy in business. He was one of the top 10 toughest bosses in Fortune magazine. They had the cover, and he loved it. He was so proud of that because he came up from that age of like, I'm going to just kick butt. I'm the smartest guy in the room. And I asked him, who's your favorite CEO? And he said, Bob Crandall at American Airlines. And I go, my favorite CEO is Herb Keller. And I said, you and I are going to start this company together. You got to help me build a company like Southwest Airlines. I don't want to be like American Airlines. And I handed him this book called Nuts, and I had him read it. And he came back and said, I can support you on this. And he said, the only thing is that I want to be the CEO instead of you when we start the company. But anyway, we became best friends. But this guy every day he got up, he read books, he read newspapers, he knew everybody, and he literally just opened up so many doors for me and taught me so much on how to be a leader. And there's very few days that I go by without thinking of him.
That's very cool. That's great.
I want to tell you, Frank, one funny story. His favorite article before he died was Fast Company did a story on our relationship, and it was Andy Pearson Finds Love. And he talked about the method that he'd learned about valuing people and appreciating them.
That's so cool.
And and I learned how to be a little bit tougher. I had to get a little tougher, and we kind of melded together.
One of the other things I'd love to get your thoughts on, retail and the frontline associates. It's not appreciated as it should be for ways people learn to work and build careers. And you must have seen the same thing.
Well, I want to give a shout out to McDonald's, in our industry, because they've got a great advertising campaign. It's like your first job, and it's all about how McDonald's gets you started in your career. But I always said that our frontline jobs are amazing because they teach you life skills. They teach you how to be empathetic with the customer. They teach you how to listen to the customer. They teach you how to recover when you make a mistake, and we all make mistakes. These are basic life skills that you're going to need throughout your career, whether you stay in the front line or work in retail forever, or if you move up. And as well as I do, Frank, there are all kinds of people at Yum Brands and Home Depot that started out at the front line and end up, being chief operating officers and presidents and CEOs. And that's what people don't talk about in retail. I hate it when I hear the media talk about burger flippers and frontline people and minimum wage and all this kind of good stuff. These are the jobs that make America what it is. And if we believe in people and treat people well, the cream will rise to the top.
That is so true.
And I think retail jobs are phenomenal. And by the way, we'd have a lot of unemployment if we didn't have retail jobs.
That's true, too. What are a couple of the biggest things you've learned as you've done the David Novak Leadership Program?
One thing is, all the great leaders are humble. They have a lot of self-confidence, but they're humble. They know they can't get it done alone. And I think that's what humility is all about. It's not you're the smartest person in the room. So I think that's one thing I've really learned. I do a lot of podcasts with entrepreneurs. I always thought that the biggest thing you need to do in marketing is solve your customers' biggest problems, okay? Well, the entrepreneurs, they understand this intuitively. They get it. They know that you need to solve the most important problems that occur most frequently for your customers, and then you have a big idea. That's how you disrupt the category. That's how you do these kinds of things. I really see how these people think. And, I think that's a really big lesson for people to listen to when they, when they're listening to the podcast. And then the third thing I would say, Frank, is the best leaders, they are avid learners. They love what they do. Because they love what they do, they want to learn more about it. They're immersed in it. It's like Warren Buffett told me once, that he just tap dances to work. In fact, he wrote a book on that. That's what the great leaders do. They tap dance to work because they love what they're doing and they learn. They don't care where it comes from. Constantly learning, going and visiting other companies, visiting other people, just to get an edge.
2 final questions. First question, do you see any difference? So now you're reaching out, you're addressing leadership at lots of different age levels. Do you see any difference in the coming generation of leaders on what they're looking for, how they're approaching leadership?
I think the basic innate things that are going to drive leadership today are the same things that drove leadership in my era, your era, and in the past. People want to make a difference in other people's lives. The best leaders are focused on that. The results come. It's amazing. You do the right things and the right things happen. I think this generation of people coming up today, they understand that better than our generation did and the generation before us, because it was more top down, tell people what you're supposed to do. You're the smart guy in the room. This generation understands that the best idea you can come up with is your own. Okay. So feed the beast. Feed people the information. Let people come to their own conclusions. And they want to be involved. No involvement, no commitment. So they want that, and they're really looking for leadership development. They want to be developed. And the problem is they're just not getting it.
Right. So for everyone listening who wants to follow up, either with your Leadership Institute or something else, what are the best ways to track what David Novak is thinking?
Well, I think you should go to davidnovakleadership.com. We have free podcasts. We have free blogs. We post a lot of information that I think would help anybody. And then we have very affordable digital leadership programs you can take if you'd like to take them. And I try to post a daily inspirational tweet. I make most days. Okay, that's at David Novak Ogo. And I'm getting started on Instagram and all the social media channels.
Perfect. Well, I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much from you over time. I know the people listening to this podcast have learned, and so appreciate your time.
Frank, I got to tell you, everybody I talk to, what leader do you admire most? Anybody that's been around you says it's you. Whether,
I doubt
I'm
that,
talking,
but you're very kind.
No, I'm not kind. I'm honest.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Again, if you want to learn more about and from David, you should go to davidnovakleadership.com. That's davidnovakleadership.com. And in the spirit of David's emphasis on thanking people, I hope you'll also take the time to go to the Crazy Good Turns website, crazygoodturns.org, and nominate someone for our $50 recognition program. It is a very powerful way to thank someone. And speaking of thanking, I'd like to thank, as always, Brian Sabin and Megan Hanlon for their excellent help producing this podcast, and also Stephen Key for his editing, and Score in LA for their mixing. Until next time, this is Frank Blake. Thank you for listening and celebrating another crazy good turn.